exhibit area across the hall there. Please take a moment to visit all the people with booths and find out about their wares and their messages. During lunch at 1 o'clock in Plaza 2, which I think probably will be this middle room, we'll have this CMUF. For those of you that don't know, the Cryptographic Module Users Forum was a suggestion after last year's conference that we'd be able to get together outside of this conference and sponsors, thank you very much, dear sponsors, for helping us with this event. It's fantastic. Utemico, Oracle, SafeLogic, and Wolf SSL, and Leidos. Thank you very much, very appreciated, and we love your support. One more logistical thing, if you're parking here, not staying, but if you drove in this morning, please see the registration desk. They can help you with your parking, and you can get a ticket for free parking, so that's nice. If you're staying here at the hotel with a car, I think that's included in your deal, so you shouldn't need that ticket. One thing I heard yesterday, several of you were interested to know how you might be able to contribute to the ISO standards. I managed to invite Dan Bonini here. Can you raise your hand? Dan is just here for this morning, I believe. He's the chair of CS1. If any of you are interested in joining that organization, so you might be able to contribute to the ISO standards, please chase him down and have a word with him. So yeah, thank you again for coming, and let's start the event. Helmut.
So, when we talk about illusions, they always have an element of deception in it, and that may be bad. Now I'll talk about an illusion we like, called virtualization. Because it provides an illusion, actually, that we have more resources than in reality exist. So, it's good, more is good. And it can optimize the use of resources. That's why we use it extensively in cloud computing, for example, because then we can really, again, optimize the cost, save money. And some claim also it provides better security. Maybe, maybe not. Is this real? Well, we will see. At least in some specific area. So virtualization also should be as close as to a real system as possible. So it gives us the illusion, actually, that we run on a real system, have all the hardware and resources for us. But it's not like that. There are always differences to the real system, and some of these differences we may like, and some of them we don't like if we know what they are. So let's now talk about entropy and gathering entropy in a virtualized system. So keep in mind what you see may not be real. So for example, you gather entropy from timing differences that are based on hardware events or other external events where you say, they're totally random. That's a standard way of collecting entropy in many operating systems. But a virtualized system may behave different. And so when you do an entropy analysis, you should do one for the real system and then talk also about the virtualized system and what has changed and if that affects the analysis of your entropy source. Because you have to keep in mind the virtualization is provided by some layer of software. And this layer of software may either deliberately or just by accident compromise all the assumptions you made for generating good entropy. And it may be deliberate, so it may deceive you. So what assumptions do we make, actually, when we use timing differences to gather entropy? The first assumption is you measure the real time. So I read the timestamp counter, and it gives me exactly the real time. The second assumption is the overall timing behavior is similar to the real system. Both assumptions may be wrong in a virtualized system. Because your timing measurement may be virtualized. And that's what a lot of people don't know. Although reading the timer is usually an instruction that can be used by anybody, even in an unprivileged state, it's usually also an instruction that you can decide to be intercepted by a hypervisor. And there are reasons for that. And the random events, actually, all these I/O events usually where you say, okay, is this random actually when I access the network or the disk and so, and you calculate on movement of the disk arm. That may not be true because the I/O is virtualized and may have much less randomness in it than you believe. So now let's assume you have a timer that returns such a value where, of course, you have all the lower bits actually, which present fractions, nanofractions of a second. And you, of course, assume that these lower bits contain most entropy. That's why you use it, actually, basically, to seed your entropy pool, because you say they're unpredictable. Yeah, they're unpredictable for you because you see them as random values. So if they would have been replaced, you probably wouldn't recognize. And the only thing you might look at is if is the time still continuously increasing, which may be the case. But if it has been replaced, you may have a problem. Now, what can you do, just as an example? You always assume actually you execute the real timer instruction, which, as I said, usually can be invoked by any program. And you, of course, say there is no operating system intervention because it's not a system call. Usually, it's just an instruction, so it operates on a bare hardware. But it can be intercepted and interpreted by a hypervisor. Most virtualization support actually allows you to intercept the timer read instructions, at least all the ones that I looked at. Doesn't mean that it always intercepted. It usually with virtualization support, you can decide what to intercept before you start a virtual machine. Now let's assume you have a bogus hypervisor. And let's assume it substitutes these values, just the lower bytes, by something else. And that something else is just generated in a predictable way, at least predictable for the one who knows the algorithm and the key and the initialization vector. So the consequences of this are your entropy pool may not have the entropy you have estimated. Not at all. And the attacker may use this information to break your keys. Okay, coming to the problem, the real problem of that later on. Yes, in theory, you can say, yeah, this is a problem. In practice, actually, if you look how it's really done, then you see there's a lot of additional information that an attacker would need to really get to the keys. Because he may not know, actually, when he intercepts a timer read instruction, he doesn't know whether you use it just for some measurement or whether it's used for really generating entropy. He would need a lot more information about what your software is doing to make this type of decision. And he may not know all the details of how you process the entropy, how you seed your entropy pool, what DRNG you're using, etc. So in reality, there are too many unknowns to use this for really breaking keys. So I don't think that anybody is really trying to do that. And if somebody's successful, yeah, let me know. So some remarks on all this, because I have to say, in order to launch this attack, you need to either modify a running hypervisor or install a new one. And in both cases, to do that, you need to execute code with system privileges. And if you already have system privileges, you can do anything. So it doesn't give the attacker much advantage, actually, to do this type of attack once actually he already has gained system privileges. But it may still help tremendously because so if you launch such an attack, actually, you're now independent of the software, what we call above you, which actually runs on top of the hypervisor. And the software above you does not need to be modified. So it runs as is, including the operating system. And therefore, it may be much harder to detect and be removed. So that actually gives you some advantage. So in reality, actually, virtualization helps you actually if you really want to deceive the user because you can hide yourself much better. Now let's look at something else on how to really do entropy or randomness. The Intel RDRAND instruction, it can also be intercepted by a hypervisor. And this is a feature well documented by Intel. So the assumption that you execute the real RDRAND instruction, which, by the way, is very well engineered and really provides you probably with perfect randomness, and of course it's a noise source, followed by a conditioning function, followed by a DRNG, so does everything you're supposed to do to generate material that you can directly use for your keys. But you may not execute the real RDRAND instruction. And therefore, but some programs actually use it as the sole source of randomness. I say, oh, we have this nice thing. It does everything that's needed to use it as a sole source of randomness. So we use it directly, take the output, and use it for key material, for critical security parameters. And an example of that, and it's only an example, is the OpenSSL library, which doesn't do any DRNG post-processing. It just, if RDRAND is available on your hardware, it uses it. Dot. Nothing, no post-processing. And it uses it regardless if your randomness is used for generating nonces or for generating cryptographic material. Now assume we do the same thing as I suggested before for the timer instruction. So we generate a number of random streams, each starting with a different initial vector, but use the same key. And the initial vector is just starting 1, 2, 3, etc. And we start such a stream per virtual machine or per storage location where a rerun is invoked. So either if the machine we target with our attack actually just has an operating system and we sneak a hypervisor underneath, we can do it just per storage location. If it's already a hypervisor, and I'll shortly talk about that, how that works, you either can modify the existing hypervisor, which actually has a problem that you may be detectable, or you may be able to install a hypervisor underneath a hypervisor, which in that specific case is possible. With all the problems that Intel has with virtualization support, it is. So now if I'm the bad guy, and let's assume actually the key I derive from some values that I know from the machines actually that I have attacked, so, and which I can identify actually when I listen to communication from that machine, that I can identify which machine it is. Or it could be a MAC address or something else that's known to us. I'll leave that open actually how you generate the key. And the streams that are now generated are indistinguishable from random data. So every test you do to check whether what you get satisfies your condition for being random, so all the statistical tests, they will pass. If they wouldn't, then AES would be broken. So now the bad guy only does to know that you're running, for example, OpenSSL in that version that uses RDRAND somewhere. Or another library that uses RDRAND as a sole source of entropy. So now let's see what happens if you now use that for the TLS protocol. And you happen to be the client, actually. The attack machine actually is a client system and has no certificate. Now we look at the protocol. What the protocol does, it generates a random nonce. In the case of OpenSSL, just calls RDRun to do that. And it has one library function, actually, that calls RDRun. So it will always use the same library function. And of course, this random nonce is sent in clear to the server in the client hello message. And later, the client generates a pre-master secret, again using RDRand, and sends this to the server, of course, encrypted with the server's public key in case you have negotiated RSA as the algorithm. Otherwise, it's slightly different. And both sides use this to derive the session key. Now, if you're the bad guy, actually, you've got to sneak that hypervisor in, and now you listen to that communication. So you have all the information to really, since you have all the information basically, and we'll see that, to detect which stream actually you're using, because it's using RDRand from the same location because it's the same library function. Now, how can the bad guy get to the session key? What he has, of course, he knows the key he has distributed somehow with the hypervisor attack, which is used to generate these random sequences in the RDRand emulation. He has these different streams per storage location. And of course, he can generate these streams himself on his machine. Now he intercepts the nonce, which is sending clear over the protocol. And now he uses this long random nonce as a kind of lookup to determine which stream and which location in the stream it was generated from. Because he knows the next thing produced is the pre-master secret. At least with very high probability. It's only if somebody in between calls RDRun from the same storage location, which is highly unlikely, that it wouldn't be the case. So, launching this attack actually requires installation of the hypervisor or modification of a running hypervisor. And I'm not going to detail how to do this because this is the hard part to do. And of course, your system should be protected against that. But be aware, just one flaw that allows execution of privileged code is enough for me to launch the attack. One flaw. Now you can add the interception of RDRand and call the emulation algorithm as described. That's not such a problem. And potentially, of course, you say, okay, excuse me. There may be timing differences when you now measure the execution between if you call the real RDRand and the emulated one. If there are, actually, I can adjust those because I can also intercept the timer. So I can deceive you also with that. And so what the attacker gets, actually, with all these things, he may have the session key before the two communicating parties have it, because he only needs to do a lookup. And then, of course, call the function to generate the session key from the pre-master secret. But the others actually still have to exchange some messages until they're at that place. And now you may listen online to the encrypted communications. And I don't care which algorithm you've chosen. Of course, there are a number of ifs, actually. You need to install this hypervisor. And if you are able to do that, you can do many other ugly things. So we've had this already. So it's not that you can do it with normal privileges. But what you need, actually, being a hacker for almost 30 years, I know actually when I really break into a system, one thing that I really need to take care of is I need to protect against detection. My attack should be invisible. So kind of dedicated microhypervisor would be perfect but this is not a simple program, but of course, this one, which just intercepts what it needs to intercept. There are a number of things that you always have to intercept. But in a lot of cases, you do not need even to emulate those. You just pop them up to either the hypervisor or the operating system on top of you and say, handle it. And it wouldn't recognize that it's coming from you. So it could be installed then underneath an existing operating system or even hypervisor, and it's almost undetectable. And if somebody has really worked in the area of, let's say, microhypervisors and has seen on Black Hat all this war on developing small hypervisors and detecting them, some people may know about a program called RedPill, which actually uses kind of oversight in Intel in the sense that the interrupt vector table can be read by an unprivileged program, but of course needs to be virtualized usually. Usually. It needs to be virtualized exactly when you're running more than one guest. In our case, actually, you would run only one guest, which is either the operating system or the existing hypervisor. So we don't need to virtualize this, and therefore RedPill doesn't work for this detection program. And of course, when we really to be successful with that attack, you need to make these modifications persistent, which may be quite hard in a measured environment. So if you use TPM-based measurement, it may not be that simple, let's say that. It complicates things. So, but still, I think the attack has its charm, actually, because your usual protection mechanisms don't work. Because neither the OS nor the application are modified in any way. So you can run your virus scanner or host-based IDS, and I always say, you're okay. Nothing has changed. And it's independent of the OS or any application, so I don't care whether you're running Windows or Linux or whatever on top of it. The only thing I need to know is you're running one of those libraries, actually, that use RDRAND and generates TLS session keys in that way. And then everything else, I don't care. And so even if you update your OS or application, which is usually a problem actually once you've infiltrated a program with something running in privileged state and then somebody updates, it's all the information that you've gathered actually on what is running and how it works may be wrong. So I don't care about this. So no OS-based malware detection system will detect that. And also I don't need to send any communication to anybody. So also anything on the network won't detect it, because the network actually, it's no additional modification of a network protocol, additional packages sent, or something like that, no. And a single security problem that allows executing code with elevated privileges is enough to launch it. And there have been many reported in the past, and most likely there are many that are not yet reported. And if you use one of those, then this attack is invisible and almost undetectable. How to protect? This looks now very scary to other people, but thanks God, the solution can be very simple. And the solution to this problem is, as always, it's diversification. Remember why the same attack that we used for the reading of the timestamp doesn't really work, because you need much more information. You don't know exactly what this timestamp counter is used for, whether it's a management or whether it's somehow seeded into the RNG or whatsoever. So that makes exploiting the attack very hard. And that is basically, if you look at things, this will save us from many types of attacks. That's not the only one. So don't pull all your eggs in one basket. So first thing, don't rely on a single source of entropy. So if you use multiple sources of entropy, the whole attack gets busted. If you use different RNGs for nonce generation and generation of key material, all this nice lookup that I explained actually on how to get to the key wouldn't work. And then, of course, the advice is you should use RDRAND, because if you really use the real RDRAND instruction, it's very well engineered and provides you with very good source of randomness. But use it together with other sources rather than use it directly for generating critical security parameters. And be also sure all sources contribute enough to entropy. This problem actually with def random on a Linux system, which uses different sources of entropy, including RDRAND, but doesn't care about which source contributes how much. And if you see how fast RDRAND can contribute entropy and how slow the other sources are, you know that there is one source that rules them all. And then, if you do all that, then the hypervisor-based attack does not have any advantages anymore, so it's busted. But who is to blame for all this? Let's find the culprit, first of all. Is it Intel? No. They've clearly documented the possibility of interception. It has also been discussed in forums, but nobody actually had thought about how to misuse it. So Intel says it's not a bug, it's a feature. And they have some arguments for that. If you buy into those arguments, it's a different thing. Yes, to some extent, because when you read the guidance for using RDRAND, of course, that has been developed by the people who developed RDRAND and the algorithm behind that, and I've talked to those people. And of course, they're so proud of their development, and they can be proud of it, that they suggest to use it for everything. At least Intel has promised to change that and give more warning in that guidance. That's when I talked to Intel about this issue, actually what we agreed upon, that this is something they should do. Should we blame the OpenSSL authors or the authors of the other libraries? Yes, I think we have to blame them because they have been naive in just using RDRAND the way they do it. They use it as a sole source of randomness and they use it for everything. Nonce generation, CSP generation. So what they have created actually is a kind of single point of failure. And you should never do that. It's a bad design if you have such a single point of failure, especially if you know that you may be deceived in that area. So you may use RDRAND and RDSeed, but use them wisely. So as a conclusion, I think I'm a bit ahead of time, but I started also ahead of time. Avoid being deceived by illusions. As we said, there's an easy way to protect against such an attack, so do it. Because if you have multiple sources of entropy, and that's what's always suggested, and if somebody listened to my talk at last year's ICMC, you also know that I was also proposing this for good reasons, because I shortly described many general ways of attacking random sources. So if you use multiple sources of entropy, breaking them all should be hard. And then never use the same random generator for generating nonces and key material. This is something also that should be a kind of design principle, because we've warned already in a paper published together with Paul Carter, I think it's 10 years ago now. I will say, if you, for example, do extensive testing of your random numbers, don't use them, because by your tests, they may have leaked. So do extensive testing, and then throw away the random numbers that you've tested, and use different ones. Then read the hardware or all documentation carefully, so that you're not deceived by and have the illusion that you're working with something that in reality you're not using, and has side effects you may not expect. And do not only mathematically analyze your entropy source. That's what a lot of entropy analysis reports currently do. They do all statistical tests and all that. But also consider how you collect the entropy from the source, because as you've seen, it's the way how you collect the entropy that can be attacked. So is good randomness an illusion? You will never know for sure, and that's if you remember last year's talk, actually it was all about the fundamental question, is 42 a good random number? And at the end, the answer was, you will never know. And today's talk, I will continue also say, you will never know for sure if your entropy is good, because there is no way to prove it. So expect the unexpected. Be prepared. And do not let illusions deceive you. So thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.